Joining us now is Cato Institute Senior Fellow Dan Mitchell. Dan, what do you think of the Treasury Secretary's testimony yesterday?
I think he's exactly right. If we get more growth, everything becomes easier. It's good for people. It's good for the federal budget. Here's the challenge, though. Mnuchin is in charge of doing major tax reform and tax cuts. But it's hard to do that when the overall Trump budget allows government spending to grow nearly 3.5% a year. If they could take that spending trend line and instead of spending growing 3.5% a year, if it only grew, say, 2% a year, you could make it much easier to do major tax cuts and major tax reform. So I'm glad they're putting a little bit of restraint on the spending side compared to what Obama left, but we need to do a lot more.
But, Dan, there is another new entitlement in this budget. Ivanka Trump's idea for paid parental leave mandated by the federal government. It's, what, $25 billion? And you know that it will only get bigger over time. And to me, if you're a conservative, that gives you a headache.
It gives you an even bigger headache if you're a libertarian, because you don't want the federal government not only spending money, not only imposing mandates on the private economy, but trying to sort of just dictate and micromanage how households and the economy interact. This is a bad idea. I hope Republicans have enough sense to sort of let it die quietly.
Hey, Dan, it's Mike Murphy. When I look at this, it seems to me that the Trump administration is saying, or the knock on this would be that they want both sides. They want a cut and they also want growth. But I'm in the camp that if we can get growth, if we can get that 3% GDP growth that we're talking about, a lot of the other things will fall in line. A lot of other things will be handled by that. So I believe that most importantly, let's get the growth and then figure out the rest of it if we have to. Can that plan work?
I fully agree that more growth is great news for many reasons, but it's not a silver bullet. The key thing we have to look at in the long run is the burden of government spending growing faster than the private sector? So even if you have 3% real growth, which probably means 5% nominal growth, if long-run entitlement spending is expanding at 6 or 7 or 8% growth, the growth by itself is great. It gets you part of the way there, but you have to reform the entitlements. And the good news is Trump is dealing with Medicaid. He's going to make the program much better by basically decentralizing it to the states and capping the federal obligation. But he's basically taking a pass at Medicare and also Social Security. And again, in the long run, controlling the size and burden of government, that's actually a critical part of getting the additional growth, because you want resources being allocated by the private sector, not by politicians and bureaucrats.
And you have a tough row to till, if you will, Dan, if you refuse to touch Medicare and Social Security.
Well, Social Security, you could probably let that slide for a while because it's not growing nearly as fast as the health care entitlements, but they have to deal with Obamacare. I mean, that's still sort of out there as a sort of a ticking time bomb on the economy. And they are dealing with Medicaid. It would really be good if they added Medicare to the mix. And again, this feeds back into the whole idea that if we want the lower taxes and a more competitive tax system, taking that spending trend line, and instead of growing 3.5% a year, if it grows 2% a year, we have so much more flexibility to cut taxes and make the economy more prosperous and competitive.
Dan, good to see you. Thank you so much. Dan
Thank
Mitchell,
you.
as always, from the Cato Institute.